shit. Let her get back up. Let her have it. Let her have it. Let her have it. This hoe got my hand. Got my hand out, bitch.
Hey, break that shit up.
Oh, they just took that girl car.
In the heart of Birmingham, Alabama, a city familiar with the echoes of hardship and resilience, a chilling event unfolded that would forever scar its community. On a humid August evening in 2024, what began as a personal dispute escalated into a tragic spectacle, broadcasted live for the world to witness. This is the harrowing story of Asia Alice Poole, a young mother whose life was violently cut short in a confrontation that spiraled beyond anyone's control. Welcome to True Crime Watch HD. If you're captivated by real-life mysteries and the intricate workings of justice, please subscribe to our channel and join us as we delve deep into the stories that shape our world. Asia Poole, at just 21 years old, was known for her vibrant spirit and unwavering dedication to her young daughter. Residing in Birmingham, she navigated the challenges of single motherhood with grace, often sharing glimpses of her life on social media. But beneath the surface of her online persona lay personal struggles and entanglements that would lead her down a perilous path. In the weeks leading up to that fateful night, Asia found herself embroiled in a tumultuous dispute with Janiah Hendricks, a 19-year-old woman from the same community. The tension between them simmered over time, rooted in personal grievances and misunderstandings that festered without resolution. Friends and acquaintances were aware of their discord, but few anticipated the catastrophic turn it would take. On August 20th, 2024, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Asia made a decision that would seal her fate. Determined to confront Janiah and settle their differences, she arrived at the Monarch Ridge Apartments, a complex nestled in the eastern part of Birmingham. Unbeknownst to her, this confrontation would not remain a private affair. In an era where moments are instantly shared and consumed, the ensuing events were broadcasted live on social media platforms, drawing an unwitting audience into a real-life nightmare. Witnesses recall the initial altercation as a heated exchange, with both women voicing their frustrations and grievances. What might have been a contained dispute rapidly escalated as onlookers gathered, some attempting to mediate, while others fueled the fire with their presence and commentary. The atmosphere grew increasingly volatile, a tinderbox awaiting a spark. That spark ignited when, amidst the chaos, firearms were drawn. The confrontation, once limited to words and gestures, transformed into a deadly exchange of gunfire. In a matter of moments, approximately 168 shots were fired, turning the apartment complex into a war zone. Residents scrambled for cover, and the digital spectators watched in horror as the live feed captured the pandemonium. When the gunfire ceased, the aftermath was devastating. Asia Poole lay unresponsive, a victim of the violence that had erupted. Emergency responders arrived swiftly, but their efforts were in vain. Asia was pronounced dead at the scene. Another individual, a male companion of Asia's, sustained injuries but survived the ordeal. The community was left in shock, grappling with the senselessness of the tragedy. In the days that followed, law enforcement agencies launched an intensive investigation. The widespread sharing of the live stream footage provided both a roadmap and a challenge for detectives. Piecing together the sequence of events, they identified multiple individuals involved in the incident. Among those arrested were Justin Hendricks, Taylor McLeod, Akareya Denai Woods, and Janiah Hendricks herself. Charges ranged from murder to attempted murder and auto theft, reflecting the complexity and severity of the case. As the legal proceedings commenced, the community sought answers and justice for Asia Poole. Vigils were held, and her family mourned the loss of a young mother whose life was intertwined with both promise and peril. The incident sparked conversations about conflict resolution, the influence of social media on real-life disputes, and the pervasive issue of gun violence in urban communities. Yet beneath the surface of this tragedy lay deeper questions. What led to the escalation of a personal dispute into a deadly confrontation? How did social media play a role in amplifying the tensions? And what can be learned to prevent such incidents in the future? As we delve further into this case, we'll uncover the intricate dynamics at play, the backgrounds of those involved, and the ripple effects that continue to impact the Birmingham community. The tragedy that unfolded at Monarch Ridge Apartments didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of tensions that had been simmering for weeks, perhaps even months. Personal disputes, jealousy, and the weight of past traumas collided in one explosive night, leaving one young mother dead and a community forever shaken. As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing picture began to emerge, revealing just how volatile the situation had been leading up to that fateful August night. It all started with Asia Alice Poole and Jania Hendricks, two women whose paths crossed in ways neither of them could have foreseen. Their conflict was fueled by personal grievances, bruised egos, and, at the center of it all, a man. A man whose name remains shrouded in speculation, but whose presence had clearly ignited an intense rivalry. According to those close to Asia, she had been dealing with immense personal struggles in the weeks leading up to the confrontation. Just days before her death, she had lost someone incredibly dear to her, the father of her young daughter. His passing had left her heartbroken, and the weight of grief was still heavy on her shoulders. At just 21 years old, Asia had been forced to navigate one tragedy after another. She was a mother trying to hold her life together, but emotions were running high, and the conflict with Jania was becoming impossible to ignore. The feud between Asia and Jania wasn't just whispered about among friends. It played out in public, in front of an audience, on social media, in Facebook posts, and in messages exchanged between the two women. Witnesses would later recall that there had been multiple heated arguments before the final showdown. Asia and Jania had gone back and forth online and in person, their words escalating in intensity. And then came the moment that would seal their fate, a challenge, a fight, a public confrontation. According to investigators, both women had agreed to meet up that night at Monarch Ridge Apartments to settle their dispute. Whether it was meant to be a fistfight or something more sinister, no one could have predicted the level of violence that would follow. But as the two women prepared to face off, others began to take notice. Word spread quickly, and soon the scene at Monarch Ridge wasn't just two women settling a dispute. It was a spectacle. Dozens of people showed up, some to watch, some to record, and some, as it would later turn out, to escalate the violence even further. Among the crowd were several key individuals, names that would later surface in police reports and mugshots. Justin Hendricks, 20, Jania's older brother, a man with a violent past now facing murder charges. Taylor McLeod, 22, another figure arrested and charged with murder and attempted murder. Akareya Denai Woods, 20, the woman later charged with attempted murder and unlawful discharge of a firearm into an occupied dwelling. An unnamed 17-year-old male whose identity remains withheld due to his age. And of course, Jania Hendricks herself, who would later be charged with auto theft after she fled the scene in Asia's car, abandoning it miles away. What no one realized in that moment, what no one could have fully grasped, was that this wasn't just a fight between two women, it was a ticking time bomb. Some who had arrived at the scene weren't there just to watch, they were armed. Gunfire wasn't a possibility that night, it was an inevitability. Asia Poole herself had gone live on Facebook just minutes before the fight began. In her final video, she looked energized, emotional, maybe even a little nervous. She was hyping herself up, unaware that she was walking straight into an ambush. The fight itself began the way many expected, loud, chaotic, violent. Witnesses say Asia and Jania lunged at each other, fists flying as the crowd circled them. The Facebook live feed captured the tension, the shouting, the anticipation. Then, a shift. The fight, which had started near Asia's car, spilled toward the breezeway of the apartment complex. People in the crowd were no longer just watching, some were getting involved. And that's when the first gunshots rang out. At first, it was unclear where the shots were coming from. Witnesses later described chaos, screaming, and people running in every direction. But the gunfire didn't stop. It only intensified. 168 rounds. Bullets tore through cars, shattered windows, and punched holes into the brick walls of the apartments. Some tried to take cover. Others pulled out their phones, continuing to record even as the violence escalated. The Facebook live feed, which had started as a fight, was now broadcasting the sounds of war. And at the center of it all was Asia Poole, caught in the crossfire. When the gunfire finally stopped, the scene was a nightmare. Asia lay on the ground, unresponsive, a bullet wound to her back. Her best friend, a young man, had been shot in the leg, injured but alive. The Birmingham Police Department arrived to find a crime scene unlike anything they had encountered before. Evidence markers littered the ground, recording each bullet casing found. The final count? 168 rounds fired. Asia Poole was pronounced dead at the scene. Her car gone, and her killers. They had vanished into the night. This wasn't just a murder. It was an execution, a massacre in broad daylight, streamed for the world to see. As the investigation unfolded, police pieced together the puzzle. Who fired the first shot? Was it a case of self-defense, or was it an orchestrated ambush? And most chilling of all, who was really responsible for Asia Poole's death? The gunmen thought they could disappear into the night. They thought the chaos would hide the truth. But investigators were about to unravel the truth piece by piece. The silence that followed the shooting was deafening. In its wake, the once crowded parking lot of Monarch Ridge Apartments was now a war zone. Bullet casings littering the ground, shattered glass glistening under streetlights, and the lifeless body of Asia Poole lying where she had fallen. The scale of the crime was unprecedented. 168 rounds fired. The sheer volume of gunfire told investigators that this was more than a moment of rage. This was an ambush. While the city tried to process the horror, law enforcement faced an urgent question: who pulled the trigger? The police response was swift, but what they found at the scene provided more questions than answers. The crowd that had gathered to watch the fight had vanished, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Vehicles were riddled with bullet holes. Apartment walls bore the scars of the gunfire, and shell casings were scattered in multiple locations. When first responders arrived, there was no immediate suspect, no weapon left behind, only evidence of an execution-style killing. One detail, however, set this case apart from the hundreds of homicides Birmingham had seen. It had all been recorded live. Unlike most investigations where detectives rely on unreliable witness statements and forensic analysis, this crime had been captured from multiple angles. Several people had live-streamed the confrontation and shooting, unknowingly documenting crucial moments of the attack. Social media had become both a weapon and a witness. Detectives worked quickly, piecing together the footage shared on Facebook Live, Instagram, and private messages. The videos captured the escalation, the heated exchange, the fight between Asia and Jania Hendricks, and the crowd closing in. Then the pivotal moment. Gunshots erupting from multiple directions, throwing the scene into chaos. Frame by frame, law enforcement identified key figures. Some individuals wore masks or hoodies, attempting to hide their identities. Others, however, had been too careless. A few faces were clearly visible, and some of the shooters had been tagged in social media posts before and after the incident. But the real breakthrough came when investigators cross-referenced digital evidence with forensic analysis. One shooter had posted cryptic messages on Facebook the night of the killing, hinting at violence. Another suspect had been bragging in private messages about what had happened. Law enforcement didn't need witnesses to talk. The suspects had incriminated themselves. With enough evidence to move forward, Birmingham police began making arrests. Justin Hendricks, 20, charged with murder and attempted murder. Taylor McLeod, 22, also charged with murder and attempted murder. Akareya Denai Woods, 20, arrested for murder and unlawful discharge of a firearm into an occupied building. A 17-year-old male, name withheld due to his age, but charged in connection with the crime. Jania Hendricks, 19, arrested not for the shooting, but for stealing Asia Poole's car and fleeing the scene. With multiple shooters involved, the complexity of the crime became clearer. Forensic analysis of the crime scene showed that gunfire had come from at least 3 different locations, confirming that this was no random act of violence. It was coordinated. The question now was, who orchestrated it? What police uncovered next changed everything. Initially, many believed the shooting had been the result of a heated fight that got out of hand. But deeper investigations suggested something more premeditated, something planned. According to private messages reviewed by investigators, at least 2 of the suspects had discussed bringing weapons to the fight days before it happened. Witnesses told police that some of the shooters had arrived before Asia even got there, waiting, watching. This wasn't just a street fight gone too far. It was an orchestrated ambush. The key question remained, who fired the first shot? As the suspects were brought into custody, their legal teams quickly pushed a defense narrative, one that would complicate the case. Their argument? They weren't the aggressors. They were defending themselves. According to their version of events, someone in the crowd fired first, forcing them to return fire to protect themselves. This defense presented a challenge for prosecutors. With over 160 bullets fired, it became difficult to pinpoint exactly who was responsible for Asia's death. However, ballistics would tell the truth. The Birmingham Police Department's forensics unit analyzed the bullet trajectories, matching casings to specific firearms. What they found discredited the self-defense argument completely. Asia had been shot in the back. The angle of the gunfire suggested that she had been running when she was hit. No evidence indicated that she or her friend had been armed. This wasn't self-defense. This was an execution. With the forensic evidence stacking up, the prosecution had a strong case. But one element remained missing. Who gave the order? Was this shooting a spontaneous act, or had someone orchestrated the ambush from behind the scenes? For Asia's family, the arrest brought some relief, but nothing could erase the unbearable loss. Her young daughter, now without both parents, faced an uncertain future. Asia's sister took to social media, expressing the depth of her grief. "Asia, I can't believe this. We were supposed to grow old together. Your baby needs you. We need you." The community rallied in support, holding vigils, calling for justice. But the case wasn't over. The legal battle was just beginning. With multiple suspects facing serious charges, the courtroom would soon become the battleground for justice versus defense claims. Would prosecutors be able to prove beyond a doubt that this was a planned killing? Would someone break under pressure and reveal who pulled the first trigger? And perhaps the most chilling question, was this just the beginning of something bigger? As the courtroom doors opened, the air inside was heavy with tension. This wasn't just a trial. It was the final chapter of a tragedy that had left a young mother dead, a community in shock, and an entire city demanding justice. The murder of Asia Poole wasn't just another case on the docket. It was a symbol of violence fueled by personal grudges, social media, and unchecked rage. The evidence was overwhelming, the accusations severe, and the consequences life-changing. But one thing was clear. Not everyone would walk out of this courtroom as free men and women. The courtroom was packed. Family members of both the victim and the accused filled the benches, their faces marked with grief, anger, and uncertainty. Journalists crowded into the room, cameras flashing outside the courthouse. The city of Birmingham had seen its fair share of violent crime, but this case was different. Why? Because it was all caught on camera. For the first time in a high-profile case, video evidence wasn't just supporting the prosecution, it was the prosecution. The courtroom was about to become a battleground of digital forensics, social media influence, and brutal reality. From the very first day, prosecutors made their stance clear. This wasn't an act of self-defense. This was a coordinated execution. They laid out their argument piece by piece. 168 shots were fired. Multiple shooters took aim at Asia and her friend, who were unarmed. The gunfire came from different angles, indicating a planned attack. Forensic evidence showed Asia had been shot in the back, suggesting she was running for her life when she was killed. To drive their point home, the prosecution played footage from the Facebook Live video, pausing at key moments to identify the accused. The jury watched in silence as gunfire erupted on the screen, the sounds of chaos filling the courtroom. For many jurors, this wasn't just testimony. It was undeniable proof. The defense attorneys had a difficult task ahead of them. Their clients weren't just accused of murder, they were caught on video holding weapons. But they had one argument to fall back on. They weren't the aggressors. The defense claimed that their clients had acted in self-defense, that someone else fired first, forcing them to shoot back in fear for their lives. They challenged the prosecution's timeline, suggesting that in the chaos it was impossible to know exactly who shot first. But their case had glaring weaknesses. No weapons were found on Asia or her friend. Gunfire from the suspects began immediately after the fight ended, without provocation. Ballistics matched the fatal shots to guns held by the accused. As the prosecution pointed out, self-defense is one thing. 168 rounds of gunfire is something else entirely. One of the most powerful moments in the trial came when witnesses took the stand. Asia's best friend, the young man who had been shot in the leg that night, gave a chilling account of what happened. He described how the fight started as just a one-on-one confrontation before it turned into a war zone. "I saw them pulling out guns. Asia didn't have a chance. We tried to run, but the bullets just kept coming. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a setup." Other witnesses included a woman who saw masked shooters arriving at the scene before the fight began, a resident of Monarch Ridge who heard the gunfire and saw multiple shooters firing at Asia while she was on the ground, a forensic expert who confirmed that Asia's wounds indicated she was trying to escape when she was shot. Every testimony chipped away at the self-defense argument, leaving the accused with few options. After weeks of testimony, the jury was sent to deliberate. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming, but the courtroom still held its breath. Would they convict, or would one of the accused walk free? After 2 days, the jury returned. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the verdicts. Justin Hendricks, guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison. Taylor McLeod, guilty of first-degree murder, life without parole. Akareya Denai Woods, guilty of second-degree murder, sentenced to 35 years. The 17-year-old suspect, tried as an adult, guilty of manslaughter, sentenced to 25 years. Jania Hendricks, convicted of auto theft, sentenced to 3 years in prison. As the sentences were handed down, the emotions in the room erupted. Asia's family wept, hugging each other as they finally saw some measure of justice. The families of the accused, however, reacted with outrage and devastation. Many still refused to believe their loved ones were responsible. Though the trial had ended, the scars left behind would never fully heal. Asia's daughter, now orphaned, was left in the care of relatives. A child who would grow up without a mother, without a father, all because of a senseless act of violence. The case sparked conversations nationwide about how social media fuels conflicts, turning small disputes into deadly confrontations. The devastating impact of gun violence in American cities. How bystanders are more willing to record violence than prevent it. Birmingham city officials vowed to take action. Lawmakers pushed for stronger gun control measures, while police warned against the dangers of settling disputes in public settings. But at the center of it all, one truth remained. Asia Poole should still be alive. This case serves as a tragic warning, a reminder of how quickly a single moment of anger can turn into a lifetime of loss. If there's one lesson to take from this, it's this. Violence is never the answer, and no social media feud is worth a life. What are your thoughts on this case? Could something like this have been prevented? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this investigation compelling, subscribe to True Crime Watch HD for more in-depth coverage of the most shocking true crime cases. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, and remember, justice is always watching.